Hello, I am Dad, and
Emma.
this is Emma and Dad Navigating Life, produced by.
Winstell Productions.
And today we're going to talk about the flow state. Are you really excited about this, Emma? Or
I am, because I experienced this for many years.
yes, that's why I'm interested in this, is because I've experienced it, and I find it very interesting. And
Yeah.
then I read about it online, and I was even more interested because the way it's mostly described online is nowhere near how well I experienced it.
Really?
Yep.
I think it describes it pretty well.
It does, but it doesn't give it, I guess. So, one of the things I did read about was that different people experience it differently.
Yeah.
And I think I may be one of those people that experience it like really to a significant degree.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm wondering if I don't know how much I experience it compared to others, but what I read online mostly didn't hit the mark. It undersold it by a lot. So maybe we'll get into that. Maybe that'll come through in our conversation.
Yeah. Talk about our differences and how we experience it.
Yeah. So I suggest I start off by reading essentially kind of the definition of what the flow state is, and what I call it the zone, but apparently, like you said, the official name is called the flow state.
Yeah. Well, in my psychology classes, that's what I learned it's called, but I always called it being in the zone, probably because that's what you called it. So,
Probably, yeah, because we talked about this when you were growing up a little bit, I think.
yeah.
Yeah. I also saw where it's called background flow. And so that's where I think this is being undersold, is because background flow was described as you're just really focused and you lose track of time.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it was way more than that. All right, I'm going to read a definition. So, a brief overview is the flow state, often referred to as being in the zone, is a psychological state characterized by complete immersion and focus in an activity. It's a state where individuals lose track of time and experience a sense of effortless concentration. It typically arises when the challenge of a task matches one's skill level, leading to a harmonious and deeply satisfying experience. I can agree to all that.
Yeah.
I think essentially it's saying that you're so focused on whatever activity you're doing that you lose track of time and that you find great enjoyment out of that. And
Yes.
there's
And
nothing disturbing you.
it's not too challenging.
Right. I think the key there is it's challenging enough for you to have to really put in the effort, but it's not so challenging that it's well beyond your ability. Because what happens if you're trying to do something that's well beyond your ability?
Then you aren't enjoying it, probably.
Right. And you probably wouldn't experience the flow state
Yeah.
because a lot of people give up when they're too challenged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you might need to refer to other outside sources. So,
What do you mean?
like maybe get help or, and that, yeah,
And so what does that do?
that would interrupt the flow state if you were in one.
I think that's one of the most common things that I've seen about this is that your flow state, if you're interrupted for any reason, that ends it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have to get back into it.
So can you get back into a flow state? And how does that happen?
Well, it would be another flow state.
Okay. But I mean, does it happen can you just jump right back into it? Let me ask you this.
I think you can, well, because I've experienced it where I did
So tell me.
at work. Serving is actually no, serving and my target job are the jobs where I've been in flow state.
So
And so at work, when I have like four tables and, I'm doing different things for each table, like one just got sat, one's getting its food, one's ordering, that's when I'm in flow state, when it's constant and consistent and I'm constantly doing something. I have to go to the kitchen, I have to go tell someone this, I have to go get a manager for this.
so how do you know you're in a flow state?
I don't realize until after when it slows down and I realize, oh my gosh, like it's already 3 o'clock. Like it was just 9 o'clock.
when you reflect back on it, you're like, holy cow, I can't believe the time went by. When you reflect back on it, what tells you that you were in a flow state?
Only the time.
So how did you feel?
Happy that it was closer to being done.
When you
But
reflect on it, how did you feel during the time when you felt like you're in the flow state?
I feel good. I always feel good when I'm in flow state because like other jobs like dental assisting, I would be really busy, but I wasn't in a flow state because I was things would be making me upset inside or I would be like distressed in some way. So I was really in tune with I was like thinking a lot about how I was feeling, which when I'm in flow state, I'm not thinking about how I'm feeling. I'm not thinking about myself at all, really.
What about, have you experienced a flow state in sports?
So running, it usually was on like when I was doing long runs after a certain amount of after a certain number of miles. Well, that's like what people call runner's high. I think that's the same thing.
Well, what'd you feel like?
When you begin to feel like it begins to feel effortless in a way, whereas before it didn't. Like you get to a certain point where it feels like you could go forever and like you're on cloud nine, like you can go faster and faster and you just feel like a feather in the wind.
Is that experience running the same as your experience serving?
I would say it's a little different because in running you still had, even though you had a runner's high, you still had to focus on your body and how you were feeling in a
Yeah.
way. Maybe you weren't in pain like you normally would be or like out of breath or whatever, but you still were in tune with your body and you still were making like conscious decisions about what to do with your body. Well, also there were times like my this is a great example, my state mile
Yeah.
in Alaska, that was like that whole entire race was flow state because I had practiced the exact splits for so long that like it was habitual for my body at that point.
Was there any point where you were suffering?
No,
Is that the one you collapse at the end?
no,
Oh,
that was when I got second in state.
I remember that. I just couldn't
Yeah,
remember if that was the race that you collapsed at the end.
no, that was here in Maryland after my
Oh,
regions meet
was it? Okay.
cross country.
Oh no, I'm thinking of one in Alaska on the track. I have
Oh,
footage of you, and I cut the footage for the final produced video. So
oh,
you came across the line, and then your legs just gave out, and you fell down.
yeah, but that whole race was like that because I was so confident and I was so confident in my skills and ability because of how much training I put in
Yeah.
and how much dedication I had to the sport at the time. And I was just so confident and I knew I could hit the splits. I did everything leading up to the race that I should have done. I didn't eat a cookie in like 4 months.
So this is why I think what you experience there is different than what you experience as a server.
That was before the race started. And then when the race started, I mean, I felt like the race ended in seconds.
This is what I mean, though, is the difference between that race and you being a server is all the preparation you put into that race ahead
Yeah,
of time,
yeah,
right? The training, the
yeah,
mental preparation,
yeah.
right? But that's what I mean when I talk about the difference. I'm not sure what you're experiencing as a server as a flow state, or I think there may be different levels of flow state, different
Probably
degrees of it.
because I mean, I like time goes by, hours go by so fast at work sometimes.
Right. But what I'm
I
saying is,
guess
I don't like the time thing as defining the flow state because it's not about losing track of time. Like I've been in the flow state where I knew exactly how fast time was passing. I knew everything that was happening. And at the end, I never said, man, where'd that 3 hours go? At the end, I was like, there's nobody in the world that could have performed better than I did during that last 3 hours. So
so. Flow state is essentially like more about like what you achieve during the time
I think it's about the quality of the time you spent, a
because
high quality of the
oh,
time.
because after I read a little bit about it, it seemed to me that like flow state was being in the moment.
Yeah, it is.
Which you can be, there are people who can be present even when they're not doing what they love.
Yeah.
So is that flow state?
I think there's different levels of it. Let me give you an example of the best flow state I've ever been in. I can remember almost all the times I've been in a flow state, if it's defined the way I'm defining it. If we're just talking about, I did something, I enjoyed it, and then I look back and I said, where'd that time go? I've done that. I do that almost every day. And by definition, what I've read online, I'm in the flow state every day, which to me, that's not the flow state.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what the flow state is to me. So I can remember I was 19 years old and I played a lot of basketball. And I've got one particular time in mind, but I know I did it many times. But I was in such great shape because we just came out of football season, I think, or I just came out of something where I was in fantastic cardio shape. I've been playing basketball for like months straight. I've been playing with other people. Like I'd go to this one gym where there was always somebody playing, so I was always playing in games. And then I also did a lot of practice on my shooting and everything else on my own. So there was a time where I started where I would play in a game and I knew everything that was going to happen before it happened. I felt like my mind could make everything change the way I wanted it to be. Like I could make the other team move to different positions. I could make other people do what I wanted them to do. Like a defender, I could make them go one way and I would go the other. I could see a pass like 5-10 seconds before it was even a pass, right? I could see where the person was going to be on my team 10 seconds before they were even there. So I literally felt like I could manipulate everybody in that situation to do what I wanted them to do.
Well, that's kind of how I felt during my race because you know how before races I would like
Visualize.
visualize my race. I did that for every race, but especially for that one, like I would even have dreams about getting second place to Allie because Allie was obviously going to
Yeah.
get first place. But I would visualize myself and have dreams of getting second place. Like I saw the entire race in my head. And so when it happened, I knew that I was going to get second place. And each person I passed, that was just one more person until I got to where I knew I was going to be.
Right. You
Yeah.
were doing what you foresaw ahead of time.
Yeah.
So my thing wasn't visualization. Although visualization is a key to it. I would visualize, jumping high or making a shot or whatever ahead of time. But in the moment, in that flow state, it wasn't visualization coming true because I couldn't have imagined how any of those plays or any of those people would have moved ahead of time. I literally felt like I was a magician or I was magical. I literally felt like I was magical. And so, for example, there was one play where I grabbed a rebound and the basketball court's fairly long. I grabbed a rebound and I turned around and I saw everybody had already started running down the court. So there were people all in the way and everything. And I saw a passing lane that a ball could barely fit through. And I threw it on a bounce pass 90 feet to the guy who went in and made a perfect layup. It was an impossible pass, but I saw it as plain as day like a tunnel. Right. So I'm not talking about like
Yeah, that's like
visualization.
extreme focus.
Yeah. It's almost like, yeah, it's extreme focus to the point where to this day, I'm not sure if I was actually manipulating with my mind where I wanted people to go or
You're Matilda.
so I can believe something like that only because of my own experience with this. It's either that or I was just so focused and I was able to I knew everybody on the court so well at that moment that I knew kind of where they were going to be.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember making any mistakes during that whole game. Not one.
Well, remember that picture of me at the Ken Island home meet for cross country?
Mm,
Where my face, you always say like my face, I'm in the zone.
oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was like it was like right before like the finish line. And I was alone the whole race, but I still like was I guess it's the goal in mind. So you're so focused on that one thing. So all I could see was the finish line. Like, and there were multiple races that were like that.
And I really think the flow state is more than just focus because you can be focused and not do anything, not do something well. And to me, the flow state is about you are doing something at the maximum of your ability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whether that's like physically or intellectually.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
emotionally.
I guess there is I wouldn't say being in the moment is flow state.
No,
Because
not
like
by
when you're
itself.
talking to someone, you can be in the moment, but you're not in a for hours. You can be in the moment talking to someone, but that doesn't mean you're in flow state.
Well, maybe you are. And that's why I think maybe
Well,
there's different levels of it.
I think it's just an umbrella term.
Yeah, but then if it's
And
just but if it's just an umbrella term, then what are the many definitions in there?
yeah, it's whatever. I mean, people are defining this feeling. It's hard to define a feeling. That's
I
putting
think
it in a box.
I think we're defining it pretty well.
Well,
Well,
yeah.
and that's the point is that they've defined this thing called flow state, and I don't think it's multiple feelings and emotions. I think it's all the same thing, but I think you can experience different levels of it. Whether if you're just talking to a person and you're focused, nothing's bothering you. You're very natural. You feel natural. You feel comfortable. I think that could be a very low level of flow state.
Like different degrees to it.
As opposed to at the very highest level, I honestly believe I experienced that by being able to see a 90-foot tunnel through a whole bunch of people that I have no control over.
I wonder what like the brain mechanisms are during flow state. Like I wonder how your brain is actually working during it.
That's one of my questions is what are the indications? How can you tell somebody's in a flow state, whether I'm looking at an athletic performance or whether somebody's got electrodes hooked up to their brain?
Yeah, I wish you could hook up electrodes to someone like an athlete in the flow state.
They've done
Like,
it.
really?
Yeah, I didn't read the case studies, but if you just look online and look for like, I don't know, scientific discovery of flow state, they've done this kind of stuff. And I think they've found something. They've mapped the brain out pretty good.
Yeah, it's probably like a certain part of the brain is really
More
hyperactive.
activity. Yeah, I think they've done it. But they still can't explain it for sure.
So maybe some people can't even experience it.
Some people can't. And it's because it was in the notes I put. Some people don't. You have to be very goal oriented. And there's some other characteristics of people that really experience it. And some people just don't have it.
I read that portion of it. And it called it like I think it was like self-concept.
We can always look it up later. So can you look at somebody? I go back to sports because we never look at somebody studying in the library and say, is that person in the zone?
Could you tell when I was in the zone?
No. When you ran that race?
Well, you were far away from the mile one. But like
I still zoomed in with the camera.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't tell if you're in the zone. I could tell you were doing okay. Like you're doing good, but I couldn't tell if you were like in the zone, so to speak.
It was almost like also part of it was almost I was in third person. I felt like I was watching myself I feel like I was watching myself run the race. Like any pain I might have been feeling, I didn't. I was kind of like outside of my body.
That's another characteristic, I think, at least from what I've experienced, is you can see everything.
You kind of like disassociate yourself from your body, and it's like your mind is just guiding your body.
Although I've also experienced where I can make my body do something I want it to do.
Well, I was making my body do everything I wanted it to do.
So
but
it's
you're
not like
you're
disassociating, but there's no effort in doing what you want to do.
It feels effortless.
There's nothing restricting you.
That's why like some athletes who have broken records, marathon records and stuff, you have to actually, do you remember Nikki Boggs?
Yeah.
She talked about this to me one time. She was telling me that in her race, it felt like she was like watching herself on a movie doing it, and how she didn't feel anything.
That's probably the flow state.
I think that's crazy.
What happens when two people in a flow state meet head to head in competition?
Remember the race where me and the two Fionas were right next to each other? I feel like that might have been.
Well, what's hard to tell is if they were in the flow state. But I wonder if it knocks somebody out of a flow state. Or if another person just can't tell.
They're probably so focused on what they're doing that they probably aren't thinking about anyone.
Well, I don't mean, I'm just wondering if there's a force, like an invisible force of a flow state that knocks somebody else out of it. But I don't now that we talk about it, I don't think so, because like you said, you're running on your own with no competition and you felt it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So probably nobody else affects you unless they do something physical or something to jar you out of it.
Yeah. Cause like even when I was running, I wouldn't hear it. When I look back on the videos, I hear all the people on the sidelines, but when I'm in it, I don't hear anyone. I might hear like mom's voice out of the crowd telling
But
me
it's
to
just
run.
part of the setting.
Yeah, but it just
Yeah.
all blends together.
So can you make yourself go into the zone, or does it have to happen naturally?
I think it happens naturally because this minute you start thinking about it, you're not in it anymore.
I don't agree,
Really?
because that hasn't been my experience.
I've only known I'm in the flow state afterwards. I've never known it in the moment.
I think if you, I take it back. I can agree with you if I'm playing basketball and I'm in the flow state and I start thinking about, oh, is my form good? Then yeah, that'll knock me out. But I can go into a session and know that I'm gonna end up being in the flow state. I could feel it coming. I don't know if it'll happen. It doesn't always happen, but I can feel when it does happen. I could feel it coming, and I know I'm in it when I'm in it. And then I'll know how it ends based on how it ends if I'll be in it the next day, right? So that's how my basketball went. I'd play in a game, like 3 hours of games. I was in the flow state, and then it'd be over and I'd be done. But I knew coming in the next day that I was still in great condition. There was nothing in my mind that said you won't be in that flow state again. And the next day, there I was back in it again.
We have very different experiences with it then because I've
Yeah.
never once thought, oh, this is gonna go. I've envisioned it, but I always also like was scared for everything. I was always just hoping for the best, and sometimes I did end up in a flow state, but I never envisioned being in a flow state. I just imagined how I wanted it to happen and where I wanted it to end up.
That was the same for me. I never envisioned being in a flow state.
But I
just
would still
envisioned,
be scared. Like I would be scared, like, oh my, are my shins gonna hurt a lot?
oh,
I was still scared of things.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think, but you're not scared in the flow state.
No,
No.
I
Right.
didn't.
So
I never knew I was gonna be in it.
we all have worries ahead of time, especially for like athletic competitions.
Yeah.
So that's natural.
As for work, I never know if I'm gonna be in it because, like half of the day will be dead and I'll be complaining all day and I'll be in a terrible mood. And then as soon as I get tables, I'm like, yippee! I'm like a completely different person. I'm very affected by like my situations that I'm in.
Yeah. I'm the
I
same
let
way
it
at work.
mentally affect me.
I will go into work in the morning and I won't know how the day will be, but then all of a sudden I'll find myself like in it and feeling good about it and feeling confident.
That was something I realized yesterday at work because I was put in the worst section and I was so mad and I was just like moping around. And then as soon as I started making money, I was like a complete 180. I was like the happiest person in there. I'm just like very, I guess,
Oh,
dramatic, and I'm a little dramatic. Well, not a little, I'm a lot dramatic, but also like moody depending on the situation I'm given.
I think that's emotional imbalance, not flow state. We've talked about sports, you talked about work. How about school? Have you ever experienced it like during school?
When taking tests, I love taking tests.
So what does it feel like? Does it feel the same?
Yes, and usually I'm like the first one done if I'm feeling that way.
I felt that way too during tests, but sometimes I'm not good at knowing if I might have felt great, but I don't know if I passed or whatever.
I know if I'm not doing well,
Oh, you do?
and I'm not in the flow state when I'm not doing well. But most of the time, I feel like I'm a good test taker, and I don't know what it is. I think it's because I'm confident in test taking. I've just always done well on tests, so I think that really helps when I take tests because I go into it knowing I love taking tests, and I feel confident whether I really know the material or not. So I think that helps a lot. Just like the same as test anxiety, when people go into it really scared and thinking that they're going to forget everything, that really, even if you know the material, you can still forget it in the moment because
Right.
of it. So it's like the opposite for me.
We're talking again about how you induce the flow state or how you prepare
Yeah.
for it. And confidence is huge.
Confidence really is key. in
You have to have
everything.
it.
Yeah, in everything, which I didn't have it in a lot of the aspects of my life for a long time. And now I'm like I can say I'm a pretty confident person, which I never thought I would be.
Yeah, confidence is huge, but confidence comes from the things that you're talking about, like being prepared,
And experiences.
experiences. The more experience you have, the more confident you are. The more training you do, the more confident you are in your ability, knowing your environment.
And I say experiences is probably, at least in my experience, it's most of how I've built confidence because I used to be really scared of talking to people, of how I would be seen or if I, messed up talking to people, how people would see me. But over time, with my jobs, I've just I would have to talk to people all day, every day. So
Yeah.
I think now I'm just used to it and I just care less about how people perceive me.
Yeah. That's the confidence piece.
Because you
And that
learn
comfort with your
that,
environment, comfort with
yeah,
your environment and yourself. All right. Anything else we need to cover with the flow state?
I don't think so.
I think that was a pretty good discussion.
That was.
Yeah.
That was a good baseline for it because I think you can go a lot more into it. I would like
If
to hear others people experiences on the flow state. We might experience it. We might experience it similarly because we're related. I would like to see how other people might experience it.
just based on reading online, it's pretty similar. There's different degrees of experiencing it, but by and large, it's all the same. That's why there's a
Yeah.
definition for it. So thank you everybody for listening. And this has been Emma and Dad Navigating Life, produced by Winstall Productions. And you can catch us at Winstall Productions on Instagram and TikTok. Any closing comments, Emma?
No, that was a really fun discussion. I really like talking about that. It's an interesting concept. We should talk about more psychological concepts in the future.
We can do that. All right. Thank you everybody for
All
listening.
right.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Can you hear me call?